Hey, amazing viewers! Before we go into this riveting narrative, drop your location in the comments below. We love connecting with you all around the world. Also, if this is your first time here, press the subscribe button and join our incredible journey. Let's hit 10,000 subscribers this month together. Your support means everything. The invitation that changed everything. The first chill of November clung to the Boston air, swirling between the towering buildings as the city stirred awake. The streets were alive with hurried footsteps, business people clutching steaming cups of coffee, shop owners rolling up metal shutters, and a few bundled-up early risers walking their dogs. But inside my small bakery on Newbury Street, the world was different. The scent of warm butter, sugar, and fresh bread filled the air, wrapping around me like a familiar embrace. The delicate hum of my mixer whirred in the background as I carefully dusted flour onto my wooden worktable. With practiced hands, I kneaded the soft dough, feeling its pliability between my fingers. I loved these early mornings, when the rest of the world was just waking up, and for a brief moment, I had this small slice of peace to myself. Then, just as I was about to roll out the first batch of croissants, a small, excited voice broke through the quiet. "Mom, look, I did it." I turned, wiping my hands on my apron, and there he was, my 8-year-old son, Lucas, standing in the middle of the kitchen, proudly presenting a tiny cupcake covered in smooth, swirled frosting. It was decorated with delicate chocolate shavings, arranged so perfectly that it seemed beyond his years. I smiled, walking over and crouching to his height. "That's amazing, sweetheart." I ruffled his soft brown hair, making him giggle. Saturday mornings had become our tradition, just the two of us in the bakery, baking together. My husband, William, was often tied up with work, leaving us to create our own little world in the warmth of the kitchen. Lucas beamed at my praise, his blue eyes sparkling with excitement. "One day, I'm going to be a pastry chef just like you," he declared with unwavering confidence. I felt a pang of emotion in my chest. Seeing him so happy, so full of dreams, made every sacrifice worth it. But not everyone in our lives saw it that way. The success of my bakery, featured in the Boston Globe, and now attracting a loyal following, was something I had fought tooth and nail for. I grew up in the South End, a neighborhood where opportunities didn't come easy, and hard work was the only way out. With the help of scholarships, I had made it to pastry school, then spent years working my way up in a luxury hotel kitchen before finally opening my own shop. Yet, despite everything I had accomplished, there was always one person who made sure I knew that, in her eyes, I would never be enough. Patricia Turner, my mother-in-law. The Turner family name carried weight in Boston. Old money, influence, power. My husband, William, was a rising star in their real estate empire, a natural-born leader with a sharp mind for business. He was everything his parents had hoped for, except for one thing. He had married me. Patricia made her feelings clear from the start. The first time William introduced me to her, she didn't even attempt to hide her disapproval. I was the daughter of a single mother from a working-class neighborhood. In her eyes, I didn't belong in their world. She had tolerated our marriage, but never accepted it. Even after Lucas was born, her coldness remained. While she showered her other grandchildren with gifts and affection, she kept Lucas at arm's length, treating him more like an obligation than family. But Lucas, in his innocence, still wanted to win her love. That's why, when the invitation arrived, I knew we couldn't refuse. The embossed envelope arrived at our doorstep on a crisp November morning, sealed with the Turner family crest. Thanksgiving dinner at the Turner estate. Every year, this gathering was a grand affair, a lavish event where the family, along with a few select business associates, came together in the Turner mansion in Chestnut Hill. And every year, I dreaded it. As I stood in the kitchen, holding the invitation in my hands, William leaned against the counter, watching me carefully. "We don't have to go," he said softly, reading my hesitation. I opened my mouth to agree, But before I could, Lucas piped up from across the room. "Mom, I want to go." His voice was full of hope. I looked at him, his small hands clutching his backpack, his eyes wide with the kind of faith only a child could have. "Maybe this time, Grandma will like me." And just like that, I knew we were going. Thanksgiving morning arrived with a biting cold wind. I had been up since dawn, baking an apple pie, not for Patricia, but for myself. It was my pride, my skill, my offering. No matter how they saw me, I wouldn't show up empty-handed. Lucas, eager to make a good impression, insisted on wearing his new navy suit, his light blue tie, one I had chosen for him, stood out against the dark fabric, a small silver pin fastened to his pocket. He looked so grown-up, so full of excitement. But as we drove through the winding roads leading to Chestnut Hill, I felt the tension creeping into my husband's jaw. He gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual. By the time we pulled up to the Turner Mansion, a line of luxury cars, Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, Mercedes, were already parked in the driveway, their polished exteriors gleaming under the winter sunlight. The house itself, a Victorian-style estate with towering arched windows and perfectly manicured hedges, loomed over us like something out of a movie. It was breathtaking and unwelcoming. As we stepped inside, the warmth of the mansion hit us first. The scent of roasted turkey, cinnamon, and expensive perfume lingering in the air. The grand chandelier overhead cast long shadows on the marble floor. The dining hall was already filled with Turner family members dressed in designer clothes, their laughter polished, their smiles practiced. Robert Turner, my father-in-law, greeted us warmly, his mild nature always at odds with Patricia's coldness. "Lucas, my boy, look at you, so grown up," he said, ruffling his grandson's hair. Lucas beamed. For a moment, it felt like we belonged. But then Patricia made her entrance. Descending the grand staircase in a deep emerald dress, diamonds glittering at her throat, she walked with the kind of elegance that only old money could perfect. Her gaze swept over us. Me, William, and finally, Lucas. A smile curled at her lips, but it was a practiced one. Something meant more for the audience than for sincerity. "Rachel, what a lovely blouse," she said sweetly, her tone laced with sarcasm. I forced a polite nod, swallowing the retort burning on my tongue. I wouldn't let her ruin tonight. We took our seats, the long dining table stretching before us, adorned with fine china, silverware passed down through generations, and flickering candlelight. But the moment I looked at Lucas's place setting, my blood ran cold. Instead of a silver plate, a stainless steel dog food bowl sat in front of him. Inside, brown kibble filled the dish, the edge engraved with the word Peewee. For a moment, the entire room fell into a stunned silence. Someone gasped. A cousin choked on their drink. An aunt turned away in discomfort. Lucas's small hand reached for my sleeve, his fingers trembling, and then Patricia, raising her glass elegantly, spoke in a deliberate, measured tone. Why would a child of slum-raised parents need fine dining? The word sliced through the air like a knife. William's fists clenched, my vision blurred with fury. And as my son's innocent eyes filled with confusion and hurt, something inside me changed forever. The breaking point. A heavy silence swallowed the room. The ornate chandelier above the Turner family's long dining table flickered against the polished silverware, casting elongated shadows on the pristine white tablecloth. The smell of roasted turkey and freshly baked bread still hung in the air, but for me, the scent had turned sickly, poisoned by the cruelty that had just unfolded. Lucas's small hands were still gripping my sleeve, his fingers trembling slightly. His usually bright blue eyes, filled with so much hope earlier, were now wide with shock. I could feel the way his breath hitched, the way he was struggling to process what had just happened. Across the table, Patricia Turner, the self-crowned queen of this family, sat with her fingers wrapped elegantly around the stem of her wine glass, her lips curled into a faint smile of satisfaction. The dog food bowl sat right in front of my son, filled with brown kibble, mocking him in the most dehumanizing way imaginable. It was meant to be a message, a final, deliberate humiliation. And the worst part, no one at this damn table was doing anything. An uncle cleared his throat awkwardly. A cousin stared down at their plate. An aunt took a nervous sip of her wine. They all saw it. They all knew what this meant. But not a single one of them had the courage to call it out. William's entire body was shaking next to me. His fists were clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His jaw locked in a way I had never seen before. "What the hell is this?" His voice was sharp, barely restrained. Patricia didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head ever so slightly, as if she were bored by the question. "Oh, William," she sighed, swirling the red wine in her glass. "Don't be so dramatic. It's just a little joke." A joke. I felt something inside me snap. Lucas, still frozen in place, didn't get the joke. My son, who had spent all morning perfecting his tie, who had been so excited to impress his grandmother, didn't understand why he had just been compared to an animal. And I couldn't let that stand. Slowly, I stood up from my chair. The scrape of my chair's legs against the marble floor was the only sound in the room. I reached for Lucas's trembling hand, and when I squeezed it gently, he squeezed back, a small, desperate grasp that nearly shattered my heart. William followed, his anger barely contained as he pushed his chair back. Across from us, Patricia's smug expression barely wavered. She was waiting for us to leave. That's what she wanted. To remind me, once again, that we didn't belong in her world. But I wasn't going to leave quietly. I took a deep breath, placed both hands on the edge of the table, and leaned forward ever so slightly. "I've put up with your pettiness for years," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "You've belittled me, ignored me, tried to erase me from this family. Fine. I let it slide because I didn't need your approval. But this," I gestured toward the dog bowl, "this is cruelty. This is an attack on an innocent child." The air in the room thickened. Several guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Patricia arched a single eyebrow. "Oh, Rachel, don't be so emotional." Emotional. I let out a short, humorless laugh. "You know what's funny, Patricia?" I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I used to care. I used to think that if I worked hard enough, if I built a successful business, if I proved myself, I could earn your respect. But I see it now. You don't hate me because I'm not good enough. You hate me because I was never supposed to succeed. You hate me because I didn't fail like you wanted me to." Patricia's expression darkened for the first time. I had struck a nerve. "Rachel, my father-in-law," Robert interjected, his voice carrying an unusual urgency. "I think we should all take a breath." But I wasn't finished. I turned to face the rest of the family, all those silent cowards sitting at the table, their eyes glued to their untouched plates. "And what about the rest of you?" I demanded, scanning their faces. "Are you just going to sit here and pretend you didn't see this? Pretend you didn't hear what she just said?" No one met my gaze. Not one person. It made me sick. Lucas's voice was barely a whisper when he finally spoke. "Mom, can we go home?" I looked down at him, my sweet boy who had walked into this house hoping to be loved, and had instead been made a spectacle. I exhaled, forcing the fury out of my lungs. Then I picked up the dog bowl. With one swift motion, I turned it upside down. The kibble spilled onto the white linen tablecloth, rolling in all directions, some pieces even landing on Patricia's lap. A few gasps erupted from around the table. Someone dropped a fork. Patricia jerked back in horror, her carefully composed face finally shattering. "How dare you?" I cut her off with a sharp glare. "You fed my son dog food, Patricia. I dare." Then I grabbed Lucas's hand and walked away. William, still seething, followed immediately behind us, his pace urgent. No one stopped us. No one called after us. As we reached the massive front doors, I heard Robert's voice rise behind us, yelling at Patricia in a tone I had never heard from him before. A few other family members seemed to be speaking up now, finally finding their voices. But it didn't matter. Nothing they could say would undo what had just happened. Lucas was still trembling when we reached the car. I helped him into the back seat, his small body shivering slightly despite the warmth of his coat. He didn't cry. He didn't say a word. I turned back toward the house, gazing up at the second-floor windows. Behind the lace curtains, I could see several faces peering down at us. Watching. I met their stares head-on. Then I got into the car. William started the engine, and as we pulled away from the Turner estate, the silence in the car was heavy. I had never been so angry in my life. But I also had never been so sure of something. I reached back, gently stroking Lucas's hair. "It's okay, sweetheart. We're going home." For a long moment, he didn't respond. Then, in a small voice, he whispered, "I don't think I want to see Grandma again." My heart clenched. I turned to William, whose grip on the steering wheel was so tight it looked like he might break it. His eyes were fixed on the road, but his mind was clearly somewhere else. Finally, in a voice thick with restrained fury, he spoke. "This ends tonight." I looked at him, unsure what he meant. But something in his tone told me that whatever was coming next, Patricia wouldn't see it coming. The consequences of cruelty. The drive home was suffocatingly silent. The streetlights flickered against the car windows, casting long, shifting shadows across Lucas's small, tired face in the backseat. He sat still, his little hands folded in his lap, his eyes vacant as he stared out the window. His shoulders were hunched, his usually energetic self nowhere to be found. It broke me. William's grip on the steering wheel was white-knuckled, his breathing heavy, controlled, too controlled. I had seen my husband angry before, but this wasn't just anger. It was rage, carefully contained beneath the surface, waiting to explode. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "I'm done." His voice was hoarse, like the words were scraping against his throat as he forced them out. I turned to him. "William, I'm done with them. Rachel." His hands tightened on the wheel. With her, with that family, with all of it. I had never heard him sound like this before. Patricia had pulled many stunts over the years, countless passive-aggressive comments, cutting me out of family pictures, excluding Lucas from gifts she bought her other grandkids. But this, humiliating our son, reducing him to a joke in front of her entire social circle. This was beyond cruelty. And for William, who had spent his whole life upholding the Turner name, fulfilling every expectation, making every sacrifice, this was the breaking point. I took a deep breath, pressing my hands together. "Are you sure?" His jaw clenched. "I am." His voice was final. For the first time, I saw it in his eyes. He was ready to walk away. From his mother, from the company, from the entire empire he had spent years building. And I would stand by him, because if this was what it took to protect Lucas, to protect our family's dignity, then let it all burn. By the time we got home, Lucas was half asleep. I helped him out of his suit, his small arms limp as I pulled his shirt over his head. He hadn't spoken a word since we left the Turner estate. His silence scared me. I knelt beside his bed after tucking him in, brushing a few strands of hair from his face. He was always such a talkative, bright-eyed child, always full of questions about the world. But tonight, he looked defeated. That was the worst part. "Mom." His voice was barely above a whisper. I leaned in. "Yes, sweetheart." He swallowed. His little fingers twisted in the blanket. Did I do something wrong? My breath caught in my throat. God. I forced myself to smile, but my voice wavered as I spoke. "No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong." His lower lip trembled. "Then why does Grandma hate me?" I felt something sharp twist in my chest. I had no answer for that. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that some people's hearts are too small to love properly? That no matter how kind, how good, how pure he was, she would never see him as enough. I couldn't. So instead, I held him. I wrapped my arms around him, holding him close, rubbing slow circles on his back as his small body shook against me. He didn't cry, but the way he clung to me, the way his tiny fingers curled into my shirt, it was worse than tears. I whispered into his hair, "Grandma's wrong." "About what?" I kissed his forehead. "About you." His breathing slowed, and after a while, he fell asleep. But I stayed there for a long time, just watching him, my heart filled with a storm of emotions, rage, sorrow, guilt. I had let him walk into that house thinking he would be welcomed, thinking that love was something he could earn. Never again. I would never let anyone make him feel like this again. When I walked back into the living room, William was on the phone. Papers were scattered across the coffee table, company documents, legal contracts, Turner Enterprises stamped at the top of each page. His voice was sharp, commanding. "Tom, listen to me. I'm leaving the company. Effective immediately." My heart skipped. Tom Watson, William's closest colleague and longtime friend, had been with Turner Enterprises for years. If William was calling him now, it meant he was making moves. I watched as he ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply as Tom's voice crackled through the speaker. "Are you serious, William? You've spent a decade building this company." William's grip on the phone tightened. "I won't let my son grow up thinking his own family despises him. I'm done being part of this toxic cycle." A beat of silence. Then Tom spoke again, his voice quieter. "Then I'm with you." William froze. "What?" "I'm done too," Tom said firmly. "Patricia's been running this company like a dictatorship for years. I've been looking for an out, and if you're starting something new, I'm in." William blinked. Then, one by one, more calls came in. Sarah Chen, another top executive. "I'm in too." David Lin, a key investor. "If William Turner is leaving, I'm pulling my shares." One by one, his most trusted colleagues stood by him. I watched as realization dawned on William's face. Patricia thought she had all the power. But what happens when her best people walk out the door? By the next morning, the news had already started spreading. Turner Enterprises' golden son had resigned. Patricia called. Twice. William didn't answer. Instead, he focused on the next step, building something new. For years, he had been the face of Turner Enterprises. He was the one who brought in deals, the one clients trusted. Now those same clients were reaching out to him privately, offering support. By the end of the week, William had an office space secured, an investment deal on the table, and a team of loyal executives ready to walk with him. Patricia had underestimated him. She thought she could humiliate our son and get away with it. She thought William would always bend, always sacrifice, always put the family name above his own dignity. But she was wrong. This wasn't just about a dog bowl at Thanksgiving. This was about something much bigger, choosing respect over legacy, choosing our family over hers. On Friday evening, as I was closing up the bakery, I heard Lucas's voice from the kitchen. "Mom." I turned to find him standing there, his hands covered in flour, a fresh batch of cupcakes in front of him. He grinned sheepishly. "I made these for Dad's new office. Think he'll like them." I felt my throat tighten. I walked over, cupping his face in my hands, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "He'll love them." Lucas beamed. "Good, because I think we're gonna need a lot of cupcakes." I laughed, pulling him into a hug. And for the first time in a long time, I felt light. Patricia tried to break us. Instead, she made us stronger. A legacy rewritten. 6 months later, the early morning sun painted streaks of gold over Boston's skyline as I stood in my bakery, watching customers shuffle in, their faces still heavy with sleep but brightening as they inhaled the warm scent of fresh pastries. A lot had changed since that Thanksgiving night. Turner Enterprises had suffered a massive blow when William walked away. The moment he resigned, half of their senior executives followed suit. Key investors pulled out, major deals collapsed, and in just a matter of weeks, the company Patricia had ruled with an iron fist was crumbling from within. The Boston business world had never seen a fall quite like it. And William? He thrived. He built something new, something of his own. With the support of his former colleagues and the trust of his longtime clients, he launched his own real estate firm. And within months, his new company was already making headlines. Turner Enterprises was no longer the powerhouse it once was. And Patricia? Well, she finally understood what it felt like to lose. She had spent years manipulating, belittling, controlling. But in the end, she had destroyed herself. She had underestimated the one thing she had never truly understood: loyalty. The same people she had always dismissed, her son, her grandson, and the employees she took for granted, had turned their backs on her. And now she was alone. An unexpected visit. It was a quiet afternoon when the door to my bakery swung open, and I felt her presence before I even saw her. Patricia Turner. She stood there in the doorway, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. Gone was the perfectly poised woman who had once ruled over Boston's elite. Her emerald dress was replaced with a simple black coat, her usual air of superiority replaced with something unfamiliar: hesitation. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. Then, without a word, she stepped inside. The cafe had emptied for the afternoon lull, leaving just the two of us standing there, the woman who had once looked down on me, and the woman she could no longer ignore. I folded my arms, leaning against the counter. "What do you want, Patricia?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she glanced around, her sharp eyes scanning the shop. The shelves lined with pastries, the framed articles featuring my bakery in the Boston Globe. My success. The very thing she had once mocked. Finally, she exhaled. "I want to see Lucas." I felt my body stiffen. No, she didn't get to do this. Not after what she did to him. Not after she humiliated an innocent child, after she made him question whether he was worthy of love. I shook my head, my voice firm. "You lost that right, Patricia." For the first time, something in her expression cracked. Guilt. She wasn't used to being held accountable. But here, in my bakery, she had no power over me. I could see it in her eyes. She knew she had gone too far. But I wasn't going to make this easy for her. "Do you even know what you did to him?" My voice was quieter now, but there was steel beneath it. "Do you know how long it took for him to stop asking why his grandmother didn't love him?" Patricia flinched. Good. Let her feel it. She looked away, swallowing hard. Then, with great difficulty, she murmured, "I made a mistake." I almost laughed. A mistake. A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday. A mistake is misplacing your keys. What she did, that was intentional cruelty. I studied her for a long moment, waiting for an apology, for regret, for something real. But Patricia Turner was not a woman who knew how to beg. So instead, she stood there, waiting for me to hand her forgiveness she hadn't earned. And I wouldn't. I shook my head. "Lucas is happy, Patricia. He's surrounded by people who love him, who respect him." And honestly, I exhaled, meeting her gaze. "He doesn't need you." Patricia stiffened. She wasn't used to being irrelevant. But that's what she was now. Irrelevant. She had written us off years ago, convinced that we would always come crawling back. But she was wrong. We had built something without her. A family, a future, a legacy. And we didn't need her approval to be whole. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, then turned on her heel and walked toward the door. Just before stepping outside, she paused. Without turning around, she said softly, "He's lucky to have you." Then she was gone. Moving forward. That night, as I tucked Lucas into bed, I felt something shift inside me. A weight lifting, a new beginning settling in. Lucas looked up at me, his blue eyes bright with excitement. "Mom, can I help at the bakery this weekend?" I smiled, brushing his hair back. "Of course." He grinned. "I want to make something new, something special." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, what are we making?" He sat up thoughtful. Then he beamed. "A new cupcake, the Turner Special." I froze. "Lucas," he giggled, "not for Grandma. For us." And in that moment, I realized something. We weren't haunted by the past anymore. We had rewritten the story. And for the first time, I knew this was our happy ending. No more apologies. No more proving ourselves. We had already won. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.